Living Loud is dedicated to all those who have ever felt invisible, silenced, or marginalized by society. Awareness and education are key to effecting change. Together, by living loud, I believe we can make a difference. Good morning, my fellow frogs and frogettes. Welcome to episode 24 of Living Loud. I'm your host, Karen J., and today I am joined in studio with Representative Rena Moran, District 65A, and she's currently serving her third term. And also joining me in studio is the challenger for the seat in 65A, Rashad Anthony Turner. Go ahead and say good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Frogtown.
All right, in just a few moments, we will begin our DFL primary debate of candidates right here on WFNU, low power 94.1 FM Frogtown Community Radio. The time is now 9:03. Let's begin with the incumbent, Rena Moran, who will give us her bio and opening statement, followed by the challenger, Rashad Turner. Thank you.
Good morning, Frogtown. This is your state representative, Rena Moran, representing the Frogtown neighborhoods, but also the historical Roundel community, Midway, a little part of the North End, and Cathedral Hill. So I am, again, Rena. I am serving my third term, have had the honor and privilege of doing so, but I'm also a mother of 7 children. I am the grandmother of 5 children. I have had the wonderful opportunity to introduce bills and policies around education, around workforce development and housing, second chances, and also police accountability. I believe in social, racial, economic, and environmental justice. And as I do my work in the community, as I do my work at the state level, as I build coalitions and partnerships with organizations and community and state partners, my worldviews come from that lens in all things that I do. And I look forward to continuing to advocate on behalf of children, families, and community through all systems, and look forward to doing that in the as I run for re-election in upcoming process. And may I just add that I am the DFL endorsed candidate here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. My bad. Thank you, Rena. Go ahead, Rashad.
Say good morning. My name is Rashad Turner, Rashad Anthony Turner on the ballot. A little bit about me. I grew up right here in Frogtown, right on Thomas and Chatsworth. I'm a St. Paul native, been here all my life. Graduated from St. Paul Public Schools. The reason, or part of the reason I'm running, is kind of how my childhood started. My father was killed when I was about 2. My mom got caught up in the streets. So I had a lot of challenges, barriers that arose when I was young. And being able to overcome those challenges is something that I'm very proud of. It took the help of my grandmother, family, community members. But that support allowed me to graduate from St. Paul Highland Park back in 2003, Hamlin University with a bachelor's in criminal justice back in 2008, and just recently finished up my master's in educational leadership from the St. Mary's University of Minnesota. I've worked in education for about 7 years. 5 years as a cultural liaison out in White Bear Lake area schools, which was a predominantly white school district, white city. But I had a great opportunity to work on racial equity in our schools. Was twice nominated for the Distinguished Educator of the Year award. After that, I spent 2 years at Century College as a scholars program coordinator, where I coordinated a program and offered financial support and academic programming and support for low-income, first-generation, and students of color. So that's a little bit about me. I'm looking forward to continuing to work hard. I also lead up Black Lives Matter St. Paul, looking to continue that fight and bring justice to Philando Castile and his family soon.
Thank you, Rashad. Okay, we'll begin with our SIPI question, and a SIPI stands for Self-Identified Prime Issue. I have asked both candidates to give me their top 3 issues that they are campaigning on, and we will begin with the incumbent, Rena Moran.
Well,
okay, Rena.
Okay.
Okay, so your first issue was job creation and workforce development. Why is this pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota? What solutions do you propose as state representative to address creating more jobs and workforce development? And how will you go about executing your plan to address these issues into action?
Yeah, well, thank you, Karen. So job and workforce development is a key area of mine because when I am walking the community and talking to people in everyday life struggling, one of the things that they say to me is that they need a job, and not just a job, they want a livable wage job. So that is important. We know in the state of Minnesota we have huge disparities within our communities of color. So making and creating opportunities where everyone have a fair chance, an opportunity to raise their family and be self-sufficient is really important to me, but it's also important to community members. So I've introduced legislation around, one, for pay equity to ensure that women are paid at the same rate as women. I've currently introduced the Women of Color Opportunity Act, which is about small business loans and technical assistance to businesses owned by women. And why is that important? It is important because when we look at the black community, over 75% of our black women are head of household. They are taking care of their families, and they need to be capable of doing that in a way that is vital for them. I also have done a huge amount of work just to ensure that we are creating opportunities for not only just women, but if they're youth. I introduced a bill for the Community Ambassador Program, which is really supporting our youth back out in the communities to get some job training, job creations, to connect that with their educational outcomes, and really supportive of that initiative. But a lot of my work, including what I've currently talked about around workforce development and job creation, looking at women within skilled trades and STEM occupations, also, focusing on our girls in STEMs. Knowing that is important, I just have to say that my work with the Ujamaa Place about bringing men into the workforce has been a huge transformative work that really allows our men of color, specifically African American men, to enter our community with some training, some job training, and some skills, have mentorship from men who look like them, and they are helping to direct their path as they look to be self-sufficient, taking care of their fathers, being the dads that they want to be, and creating systems that allow that to happen through a racial justice viewpoint.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Rashad, you have 1.5 minutes to rebut.
With the job question, I think that a lot of politicians are used to being able to tell the community, oh, we're going to bring jobs, right? I would like to point out to our community that there's been billions of dollars with a B of new economic development, multi-million-dollar projects right on University, for example, the King's Crossing, Frogtown Square, Rondo Library, Western University Plaza. All of these buildings are multi-million-dollar projects, and for some reason, our elected officials and other city officials are not complying with Title VI, Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act, Section 3 contracting. So with that being said, we have jobs right here in our backyard that are going to people from Wisconsin, going to people from Iowa, going to people from North Dakota. So I think that when it comes to job creation, we don't need job creation, right? There's enough jobs right here in our own backyard if we give them to and make sure that our community is represented on those job sites. Section 3 would say that 10% of the contracting jobs and 30% of the building jobs should be going to the community. As a state representative, that is something that I want to make sure that we are applying in our community, but at the same time raise those numbers, right? 10% and 30% are crumbs compared to the millions of dollars that are being spent right here in District 65A.
Okay. Thank you, Rashad. Okay, the next question will go to Rashad. This is your first self-identified prime issue. Why is police brutality pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota? What solutions will you propose to address police brutality? And how will you go about executing your plan to address police brutality into action?
So for me, for a lot of people in our community, police brutality is something that is just terrifying us as a community, as a black community, as people of color. Right here in St. Paul, we've had many deaths at the hands of police. Most recently, the death of Philando Castile at the hands of St. Anthony Police Department. So I think that police brutality is something that is a big issue. It's a big issue here in the state of Minnesota. It's a big issue nationwide. What we have to do is, one, be protesting to create awareness and wake people up that these injustices are present and very prevalent in our community. On top of that, we need to change laws. Right now, police officers are getting away with murder with basically impunity. We're not seeing officers indicted. We're not seeing our elected officials speak up when these killings happen. St. Paul has been affected by this many times. Our St. Paul Police Department, although I do great work with Chief Axtell, Chief Iovino, and they are doing things, they have been the most deadly police department since 2010. So that means that we need a change in law. We don't need to have more training. We don't need to have community meetings. There's a problem. We know what the problem is, but it's how do we fix it? I have a criminal justice degree. Spent 4 years at Hamlin with very great professors. I went on from Hamlin to spend time at the Center for Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement, where I completed the state skills training, which is basically the required police academy that all officers go through before they become post-certified. I feel that that experience, that knowledge of the laws and state statutes provides me with an advantage when it comes to honing in on what laws need to be changed. Something specific that we need to change is the use of deadly force statute. Right now, the way that statute is written is what is leading to officers going away scot-free for killing, right? In that statute, it reads, officers can use deadly force, and there's a number of reasons they list. But what we're hearing a lot in these stories is that there was some type of fear, right? A lot of times the community perceives that as a false fear, more of an excuse to get away with killing. But something in particular that I want to draw people's attention to is, say, for instance, you, Karen J., you robbed a bank, let's say at 8 o'clock this morning, right, before you got to the show.
Oh, why you got to use me?
Well, you know, just because it's you. But say you robbed a bank, right? State statute would allow officers to use deadly force at any time that they see you after you've robbed that bank and been identified as a suspect in a bank robbery. They could show up at 10 o'clock at night, catch you getting some coffee and SA, and shoot you without warning, without reason at that time. To me, that is something that we need to change, or we will continue to see people like Marcus Golden, people like Phil Quinn, people like Philando Castile killed by the police.
Okay, Rena, you have a minute and a half to respond or rebut.
Yes. So police brutality and that concept is real. As a mother of 4 young adult black males, I know that police racial profiling is real. I know that vices are real. I also know that over-policing of our community is real and wrong. And so this is personal for me, not as a politician, but as a mother who have black young men as sons. And so what I have done, and not just done with my own ideas, but in communication and relationship to community members and organizations, is to introduce 2 bills. I introduced one because, you know, we all remember back in the day what community policing looked like when they was walking the beat, is that I introduced a bill that stated that police must live in the municipality in which they work. It is really important that community members have police have relationship with community members. I also introduced a bill that would change the way officer-involved shootings are investigated and prosecuted. The bill will require an outside investigation as well as prosecution by the state attorney general to increase transparency and decrease the conflict of interest. Those are 2 bills that I introduced. And as you know about the process, or if not, I am in the minority, so I didn't get a hearing, but we're going to continue to fight with that on that issue. And just as a caveat to this, I just want you to, the listening audience, to know that the work that I do is in partnership with community, and I've been in relationship with the Castile family, Valerie and Clarence, who have asked me to carry legislation for them that we are working on currently.
Okay. Okay, Rena, your next SIPI question is on affordable housing. Why is affordable housing pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota? What solutions will you propose to address affordable housing? How will you go about executing your plan to address affordable housing into action?
Well, this is an issue that is another issue, again, that is dear to my heart. I came to Minnesota in 2000 and found myself homeless with my 6 kids. And it took 4 months before I was able to find housing. And the term affordable housing is up for grabs, what that really means, because we know that people are working minimum wage jobs, that they are paying more than 30% of their income for housing. So there's a problem with that. And so creating policy and legislation that is working for families is really dear and important to not just me and my family, but is what I hear on the ground in the community. We have a really disproportionate number of people within our community who are homeless. And they're not just families, these are youth who are riding the bus every day from downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis. So what I have done already is made, at the state level, we've made over $100 million in investment in homelessness, affordable housing, transitional housing, shelters, whatever it takes to lift people up out of their situation. I am open and have avidly advocated to really close those gaps. Another thing that I have done, which is the educational housing piece, but I work with the YWCA in St. Paul, who mission and value is about housing the homeless. I've also given this past session $1 million for them to continue to do the work that they do to house families, stabilize family, to create better educational outcomes that we need. Another entity, when we look back at UJAM and the work that they do with their young men, a part of that transformational work that they do is also about housing the young men that are going through their program. So this is the work that I've done on the ground with community advocates, community organizations for the Homes Are All Coalition. This is a personal issue that has impacted my family that will continue to uplift and bring awareness around, and then do this work through a racial disparity lens. We cannot overlook that communities of color are disproportionately being impacted around homelessness, and it is my value, a core value that I carry to ensure that people are safe, stable, and able to be in a place where their family can, thrive and have an opportunity to not just reduce disparities, but to move out of poverty.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Rashad, your rebuttal.
All right, so I just want to touch on a couple of things. From the last question, Rena said that she introduced, but I want to make it clear that those had a hearing, not passed, so they did absolutely nothing for our community. As far as housing, we have a homeless rate that's been on the rise over the past 6 years. So the number of people you see standing at Dale and 94, Lexington and 94 on the corner with signs stating that they're homeless and need help has increased since 2010. When it comes to affordable housing, we have one of the largest housing gaps in terms of housing affordability, home ownership within communities of color. And when we're talking about homeless people, we have a high population of homeless youth. So as a state representative, when I become elected, one of the things I want to do in collaboration with others is to focus on transitional housing for the youth. If we can get them somewhere where they are stable and don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from, where they're going to be sleeping that night, that will do a lot for our young people. So when you think about right now, there's 50%, probably around 50% unemployment rate for youth. That correlates with the homelessness rate. So if we could take some of these empty houses, empty buildings, turn them into transitional housing, that would do a lot of good for the youth who are sleeping in the streets every night.
Okay. Okay, Rashad, here's your second sippy question on economic injustice. Why is economic injustice pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota? What solutions will you propose to address economic injustice? And how will you go about executing your plan to address economic injustice into action?
So when I think about economics, right, when we see all of these problems in our schools, in our streets, with violence, you see police brutality, things of that nature. To me, the beginning of that is economic injustice. When you have people who are unemployed, right here in District 65A, the unemployment rate for African Americans was right around between 30 and 40%, depending on what you're looking at. For our East African immigrant community, it's around 70 to 80%. So economics are important. Like I said earlier, there's been billions of dollars of economic opportunity that's come into our community, but a lack of compliance has meant that those jobs are going elsewhere. If we can comply, right, as a community, if we can inform ourselves on Title VI, Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act, if we can inform ourselves on the Section 3 contracting rules, and then get compliance from our government, from our elected officials, that will do a lot. Can you imagine that? You know, Rondo Library, I want to say, was about $13.5 million to build. Could you imagine if even 10% or 30% of that went to our community? Right here in our community, we would eliminate the unemployment rate if we were to comply with things like Section 3.
Okay. Thank you, Rashad.
Thank you.
Rena, you have a chance to rebut.
Well, you know, I know the importance of building an economy that works for everyone. That is truly important to me. Minnesota faces some of the staggering income disparities there are in the country. The median income for African American families is around $22K. And the same is around for Native Americans, Asian Americans, about $31,000, which means that, you know, the white population is making about $50,000. We are half that. So recognizing that communities of color face inequities and barriers to employment, I have been a strong advocate at the Capitol. In this last session, was able to pass and bring in dollars around the racial economic disparity legislation of $35 million. This is dollars that went with some direct appropriation to organizations of color that's working with people on the ground from communities of color. And this also has been a competitive process where others can also apply for these dollars. But these dollars, these focused targeted dollars, are crucial to the beginning of helping to lift people and people of color out of poverty, because the disparity is there. This is not my say. This is the research and the data is there for us all to see. And I will continue to be a strong advocate for District 65A, for the needs of our community, and work to ensure that people are able to be self-sufficient, self-sustained, and taking care of themselves. That is what I hear from the community people, what they want, and with them, I will continue to fight for that.
Okay. Rena, your third SIPI question, self-identified prime issue, is education reform. Why is education reform pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota? What solutions will you propose to address education reform, and how will you go about executing your plan to address education reform into action?
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, education is the path out of poverty. It is a path out of poverty. As a person who has a bachelor's degree in early childhood education, I know, and all the research and data stands in a place where we know the importance of investing early. And I believe investing from zero to post-secondary education. And I have been a strong advocate for bringing dollars into our community for early childhood education. When we look at the homeless population, sometimes that is the only stable environment children often will have as parents try to navigate their jobs. It's unaffordable, so we're looking at the cost of that. I was proud to be a part of passing all-day kindergarten. If parents choose to send their kids to all-day K, that is hugely important in allowing kids to enter kindergarten reading by kindergarten and to enter kindergarten ready and prepared and reading by third grade. The stats say if that happens, they are more apt to be successful in school and in life. I also like to just tap into the fact that as we are in our youth are moving into our educational, post-educational system, that they are coming out in huge debt, and that is not okay. So creating legislation that is freezing college tuition we're doing it right now at community colleges. If you are going into a certain field within a community college, 2 years of college is free. We had an opportunity to freeze college tuition for 2 years. And so we also are looking at legislation that will help youth, young people, and older people who are going back into college be able to refinance that student debt. Because right now, currently, people are making decisions as they are graduating out of college, whether or not they're going to buy a car or maybe a home, or just making decision about life because this huge debt is lingering over their head, which is the right now, the research says that Minnesota has about $30,000 in debt upon graduating from college, and that's the minimum. It just goes up from there. So education for me is a path out of poverty, is a way that our kids can position themselves for working to reduce the achievement gap, but also at the end of the day, it is important that our kids that kids and families have the opportunity to ensure that we are working towards reducing disparities, reducing the achievement gap, creating opportunities for that to happen, and working to ensure that communities of color are not left out of this process. So it's intentional, it is with partners, and it really is about, lifting a community of people out of poverty. And so it's an issue that I care dearly about.
Thank you, Rena. Okay, Rashad, you have a minute and a half to rebut.
So I'll say this, right? Getting kids into school, getting them that opportunity to go to kindergarten all day, pre-K all day, that's great. But it's not fixing the deeper problem. When you look beyond that, right, these kids are entering a broken system just earlier. And there's a great chance, based on the data, that after third grade they won't be able to read, which means that from there a prison bed is built. So we have a school-to-prison pipeline that needs to be plugged right now, right? Ms. Moran has had 6 years to address these issues. She's failed to do that. She voted no on a bill that would have brought more teachers of color from out of state by amending the licensing rules here in Minnesota. Right now, teachers who live outside of the state of Minnesota, in order for them to come to Minnesota to teach, and say they have their master's already, all of the license they need, wherever they're coming from, they basically have to give up all of that and start over here. Who would want to do that, right? There was a bill on the table. Ms. Moran voted no. And I would say that bill would have helped our children. Another thing, as we are talking about ed reform, right, we have a curriculum that's failing our students that needs to be fixed. We have SROs in the schools who are beating our children in some case, not serving a purpose to protect the schools. So I think that there are deeper issues when we're talking about ed reform. And I think my third question had something to do with that, so I'll...
Let me ask the question.
Yeah.
I am the captain now.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Rashad, your third self-identified prime issue is also education reform. So why is education reform pertinent to District 65A and or Greater Minnesota to you? What solutions will you propose to address education reform, and how will you go about executing your plan to address education reform into action?
So, thank you. So, with me, there's a few things that need to be addressed, right? We have a tendency to put Band-Aids on gunshot wounds, if you will. And when we start, as far as the school, we have to look at right now what curriculums are in our school, what type of funding are going into our school, where that money is being spent. I think that we're spending a ton of money on education, while at the same time the achievement gap, or what I like to call the opportunity gap, is continuing to grow. So we continue to put Band-Aids, 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 money, 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 but we're not seeing any change. So I believe that we need more charter schools so parents can have an option that if the public school is failing their kid, not meeting the needs of their student, that they can have an option to go somewhere else. Not all charter schools are great, but I think that when parents have options, they can make the best decision for their kid. As elected officials, as schools, I don't think it's right that we tell families what's best for them. I think we need to do a better job as a community, as education leaders, members, community members, in really meeting the needs of all students and families. And right now, that's not happening. Some things that, as I mentioned earlier, more teachers of color in our schools. If our kids can have someone in front of them, right, that looks like them, that understands their lived experience, that goes a long way. It's not to say that, we don't need white teachers, because we have great white teachers who care about all kids, and that's important. But when you think about a curriculum that our students have to endure, that doesn't acknowledge them, doesn't state the truth about history, really creates this inferiority complex that we see in our community, in our schools, that's something that does a lot of problem, does a lot of damage.
So how will you execute your plan?
I will execute that plan by continuing to work with education professionals, education leaders, and getting away from partisan politics. I think it's ridiculous that we see time and time again, people just stick to their party, right? We forget about who's most important, and when it comes to education, that's our kids and their families. So I will work with everyone to do what's best at all times. Another thing that's important is the way our schools are set up, right? Right now, our schools are still operating as if everybody's farming in the summertime. So our kids have a couple of months off. During that summer, what some people call a summer melt, our students lose a lot of what they've gained throughout the year. So if we can increase programming, experiential learning opportunities, things of that nature to give our students the opportunity that they have out in the suburbs, right? We need to do something about the difference between an education right here in 65A and say one of our families moves to Woodbury. There shouldn't be a disparity in what they've learned.
Okay, thank you, Rashad. Okay, Rena, you have a minute and a half to rebut.
Well, I just want to first address this whole school-to-prison pipeline that Rashad talks about. And a part of is breaking that pathway is the investment in early learning, so kids are entering kindergarten ready and prepared and reading by third grade, because all the stats is about the third grade. In regards to legislation that Rashad said that I voted against, I don't quite know what he's talking about. I am a strong advocate for education. I grew up in a black school, so I know the value of having teachers in front of you that look like you, or principal that look like you, and having paraprofessionals in the building that looks like you, and the power and that position and presents to a child of color. I've also introduced legislation to bring more teachers of color into our school system. The current legislation that was passed was for us to partner with the surrounding states of Minnesota, who are as white as Minnesota. So for me, when we look at communities of color, we need more teachers of color in the classroom, and that is what my bill does. I am a strong supporter of parental choice. Most of my bills, and probably most of them, the majority of my bills, have all been passed with bipartisan support. I have great relationships with my Democratic colleagues, but I also have some really great relationship with my Republican Party members.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Okay, so now we are at the point in our debate schedule where, Rena, you will have a chance to respond to Rashad's rebuttals, and you have 3 minutes. All of the rebuttals. Whatever you didn't get to say in the rebuttals, you can respond to now for 3 minutes.
So I just want to do, when we talk about, school choice, I'm not so keen in supporting private schools with public dollars. But in regards to more charter schools, I believe that's a parent's choice to decide what is best for their kids, and they should have the right to do that. And I just want to give a shout out to Truth Preparatory Academy, which I was at their event yesterday. That is a school that has now like 95% of that school population is African American. Our black young boys need to see that. So I just want to put that out there. The whole initiative around what we need for legislation around police officer. I am working on that. I have worked on that. I have legislation that's put out there. And when you're in a minority, I'm sure Rashad knows, hopefully he knows the process, is that when you are in a minority and you have a Republican who are chair of that committee, your bills don't get here. It takes you to be in the majority to move your agenda and to invest in the ways that we want to invest. So hopefully he'll become a little bit more informed about that process and how we can move legislation through a body that creates transformational changes that is needed in our community. let's see here. Housing. I just want to just tap a little bit into that housing piece because, I talked a little bit earlier about, my own personal situation with homelessness and being able to transition from being homeless to being a renter to now owning my home right in the Rondo community. But just for the facts, I have been a champion on issues of homelessness, youth homelessness, senior housing, and safe harbor legislation. We know that children have better educational outcomes, adults are more able to get jobs and go to work, and people can succeed when they have stable housing. I am a participant of that process, and so advocate strongly on behalf of the homeless population. I've also been in relationship and communication with the High School for Recording Arts that is right in our district. If you go into that building right now, have 50% of the population in that school is homeless. That is not okay. It is not right. But we have great teachers in that building who are going beyond their responsibility of just teaching to love those kids, support those kids, and provide opportunity for them to be successful and have their dreams become a reality. That's the type of working relationship I have been doing in the community, with the community, and for the community. My goal has always been to bring the voices of our community to the Capitol, but also to bring the Capitol into our community, because this is important. This is a two-way street that we need to know that process. And as a legislative of 41,000 residents, I am making my way to get to know everyone. Haven't quite made it there yet, so that's
okay. Rena, time.
Yes.
Okay. Rashad, you now have 3 minutes to respond to Rena's rebuttals.
All right, so first I want to back up a little bit and not even ask, but just rhetorically, if Rena doesn't know what I'm talking about when I say that she voted no for a bill, I'm not sure how much more informed I can get. And I'm very curious as to why she does not know what bills she's voted no on or what bills she's voted on, period. That just sounds ridiculous. Also, a few things that I want to talk about is when we focus racial equity dollars on organizations, Ujamaa Place does great work. But even if Ujamaa Place served 200 men, we still have the masses of people who are affected by these disparities, who have to live every day with no support. One thing I've heard from several community members is, well, how does that money go directly to the community? How does that money help the kid who's standing at the bus stop all day looking for something to do? How does that money help the mother who's living paycheck to paycheck put food on her table, right? That's something we don't see. Again, it's great to give organizations money and organizations that are doing good work like Ujamaa Place, but I want to focus on the masses of people, the people who have been voiceless, who have been forgotten about. That's my focus. Another question I really have on when you give money to organizations and then their executive director or people from that organization make donations to your campaign, I have to question if the best decision was made for the community or if that was a decision made for a friend, right? Again, Ujamaa Place, shout out to them, Otis, Richard, the guys that are over there, Kadar, they do great work, we work together, but I have to question things like that. I also have to question why a candidate would be receiving money from lobbyists. And then we have to look at, with the achievement gap rising, housing gap rising, unemployment rising, poverty rising, what exactly has been done? Or do we have a representative that's just pushing the agenda of the lobbyists who are funding her campaign? Ms. Moran has not had any voice on police brutality. We've had many instances where people have been killed right here in our community by the police. We've had protests to create awareness. At no time has Ms. Moran been present, till recently, right? Till now it's election time, and the cameras are out there, and she wants to bring a tray of food to put on this front that she's been out front on these things. She has not been. She's criticized our protesting at the state fair. But my question is, if we don't have the support of our black legislator in protesting, why do we have the support of the St. Paul Federation of Teachers who joined us at Black Fair? So my question is, what are we doing? Are we serving a few, or are we thinking about serving the masses who are affected by these disparities?
Okay, thank you, Rashad. Okay, now we are ahead of schedule. So if you two would like to agree, I will turn both your mics on for 3 minutes, and you may discuss back and forth, but do not talk over each other, or I will shut your mic off and spank you. Do you want that or no? Rashad's shaking his head.
Rashad doesn't want to do that.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Well, then, we are at the point where we are going to take a bathroom break or whatever. Are you guys okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so... Nothing? All right. Well, if you're just tuning in, you are listening to WFNU, Low Power 94.1 FM St. Paul, Frogtown Community Radio. This is Living Loud. I'm your host, Karen J., and we are in the middle of a DFL primary debate with incumbent Rena Moran and challenger Rashad Anthony Turner. And now we are at the point in our schedule where I am going to give them constituent questions, and then they will each have 1 minute to respond. All right, and I'm going to trust you to behave yourselves because I'm tired of turning off mics. Okay. All right, so the incumbent will answer first. It's the same question for both of you. Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay. The first question from the constituent is, what concrete steps can the state rep take to help increase the standard of living in Frogtown and help Frogtown families to build wealth?
Yeah. So one would be to continue to do the work I've been doing around workforce development, job creation, looking at within our educational system from birth to post-secondary education, but also work in partnership with the St. Paul, with the city, to pass the ordinance around paid family leave. I think it's really, really critical that that happen. Our parents should not have to choose between taking care of their loved ones and having enough money to pay their bills. Another bill that I've authored was also around fair scheduling. There's many people in our community who are working minimum wage jobs, who are working as waitress and other positions where they need to know their schedule. But also increasing the minimum wage to $15 now. We've done a great job of increasing to $9.50, but $15 is on the go. And increasing child care assistance is crucial to families who are working and need a place for their child to be so that they can go to work. Those are just some of the things that I believe we need to invest in.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Rashad?
So I would say that you need a job for any of the stuff that Ms. Moran just mentioned to matter. So, as a representative, I want to focus on having community oversight of the Section 3 rules. Again, there are millions of dollars of jobs, of economic opportunity right here in 65A that we need to make sure that the government and that our city officials are complying with. And when they are not in compliance, there needs to be a penalty, because the people who suffer from our government or elected officials claiming ignorance as a defense are people of color. So we need to be able to bring those jobs, we need to give them those jobs, make sure they have access, an equitable opportunity to the millions of dollars, billions of dollars with a B in total of economic opportunity that's right here in our own backyard.
Okay, thank you. Here's the second constituent question for Rena. Are you willing to introduce legislation to lobby the federal government for a waiver of HUD rules to allow people to stay in Section 8 housing as their income increases, to soften the shock of going from subsidized housing to paying full rent?
Absolutely. Having struggled through homelessness myself and being on Section 8 myself and now a homeowner, I know how difficult it can be to get stable as you work and fight for the way out of poverty. We also may want to look at how we can ease the cliffs for family that are actually moving out of poverty and not just offer assistance, right? It is really creating livable wage jobs for families to be self-sufficient and taking care of themselves. So absolutely, and we'll do that in partnership with the city.
Thank you. Rashad?
$9.50 is actually half the cost of the living wage, right? As far as the programming for Section 8 housing, I really feel like our policies trap people, right? They give them everything. You can get Section 8 housing, food stamps, cash assistance, but if you go work a job where you work 21 hours and maybe make a couple $100, now they're taking away everything that you have. So it's one of those things where we're setting up families either for failure or setting them up to keep them in poverty rather than maybe having limits, right? If you have a range from poverty to say 40,000 or whatever the number is, and you tell them, as you move through this, we will continue to support you, but once you reach this level and you can actually sustain your income, can feed your family, can pay your bills without the stress or worries, then we can start to sort of reduce the services. But right now we're trapping people. Why would somebody want to give up Section 8, food stamps, welfare assistance, cash assistance?
So will you are you willing to introduce the
Oh,
legislation?
absolutely.
Okay.
I think it should have been introduced 6 years ago. At least 6 years ago.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Third question. What is your vision for commercial industrial redevelopment in 65A? What role can and will you play to recruit businesses and employers to locate, build, or expand their companies here? Rena?
Well, I envision a redevelopment in our district that includes some of the old and some of the new. You know, we have great mom and pop businesses, local businesses here that we want to see to be able to thrive and create the wealth that they need. But we also want to introduce new projects into our district. And I believe there's a lot of room to improve the commercial redevelopment that's going on University and Avenue in the corridor. The completion of the Green Line development was one of those processes, and it was really one of the reasons why I ran for office when the Green Line came through. You know, as a person who had just bought a home in the community that she loved and could afford, I was also one of those people who was scared that I would be taxed out of my home and organized around the Save Our Homes project. So there's space for both to happen, and I'm working towards that end.
Okay. Thank you. Rashad?
My vision for any commercial or industrial redevelopment in 65A is to make sure they have a strong focus that from construction through employment and hiring, that they are hiring people from our community. I don't care if we bring in a place, bring in a company, redevelop, whatever, new developments, we need to make sure that our community are the recipients of those jobs. Right now, that's not happening. When Ms. Moran took office, she was actually in opposition to the Green Line. And she should have kept that opposition, but instead, she flipped so she could get elected. The Green Line has done absolutely nothing for our community except for create more opportunities for young people to be harassed while they're riding Metro Transit lines.
Okay. Next constituent question. How will you work with those whose opinions and priorities are different than your own? How will you go about building a coalition to help move legislation that is important to Frogtowners? Rena?
Yeah, this is definitely one of my strengths in how I do my work, especially within the legislative process. That as one African American in a body of 134 legislators, city, rural, different viewpoints, different opinion, it is crucial to move legislation through that body when you are in the minority, but when you're also in the majority. And I have been able to move legislation in both instances, just as I have done this last session, bringing $35 million into the communities of color while in the minority. So it's important to have partners in the Senate. It's important to have partnerships with the governor's office. It is important to have partnership with community members, coalition building, and having, a good temperament, where you're not combative, where you're not name calling, where you are creating a process for solution is crucial for the people in our district to continue to have the resources they need so that families and children are building strong.
Rashad?
So my work with Chief Axtell, Mayor Coleman, Chief Iovino of the St. Paul Police Department, My work in White Bear Lake schools, primarily working in a white school district on racial equity issues, there have been several times where Chief Axtell and I, we don't see eye to eye, but we're able to sit down and sort of find that common ground in order to do what's best for the community. So I think that I've exhibited that. Also with Mayor Coleman being able to negotiate and do what's best for the community, I've exhibited that. Ms. Moran earlier said she couldn't move legislation being in the minority, and now 5 seconds ago, she said she's passed legislation in both the majority and the minority. So I want our listeners to be mindful of politicians who tell us whatever we want to hear at election time in order to gain our votes, but break those promises and the disparities continue to rise.
Okay, next question. This is question number 5. What can you do to increase the voter franchise? For instance, reinstating voter rights for convicted felons. Rena?
Yes. Just to rebuttal that real quick, to get a hearing on bills that you introduce when you're not in the majority, you have no control of that. It's not about the legislation. I've been able to do that well. So this is some issue that I've been working on since 2008 around restoring the vote of ex-felons. Once they have been released from incarceration, it's an issue that I have worked on in partnership with organizations like Take Action Minnesota and that coalition there. I have been doing it with Micah and Isaiah and, community members who, Ujama Place, and others who values the voices of every person who are in the community to be able to represent how they feel through the voting process. I've done it. I introduced the bill, and I continue to work and advocate on behalf of that legislation.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Rashad?
I want to increase it by connecting with the community. I spend several hours in our community talking to people. A lot of felons don't know that once they're off papers, probation or parole, they actually can vote. So I think that it's about getting our community informed so that people who make a mistake, they commit a crime, they go and do their time, I do feel that once they're released, they've done their time, they've paid their debt to society, they should be able to vote right then and there. This is something that when I take office, I will work on from day one because we need more people involved in the process, which is why it's very important that people show up to the primary because that's where, politics is who gets what. And if you're feeling like you don't have, that your voice has been forgotten, left out, you're marginalized, your poverty experience is getting worse, you have to be involved in the process. So I think it's about getting our community informed about the importance of voting so there's not this idea that only the presidential election matters, right? We have to get people just as hyped up for local elections as they get hyped up for the presidential election. So I do that by just connecting with them, letting them know we care.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the 6th question. What are your views on universal early childhood education, K-12 funding? Do you feel that property taxes being the main funding mechanism is the most fair and effective? Rena?
So, again, as a teacher of early learning for the last 15 years, that's something I did while raising my 7 kids myself. I am a strong advocate for early childhood education. I had an organization that came to me in 2013, I believe, where the Republican had taken down the number of days that a kid could be absent from school from 25 to 10. It was going to really impact kids being able to stay in the early learning process. I carried that bill, worked in partnership with a coalition from community folks, and was able to get that numbers reinstated. So now there's better outcomes and chances that kids can stay in school and be well represented. Property taxes, no, that is the system currently that schools are funded through our property taxes, and it is unfair, it is unjust, and it is not right, and it is something that we in a greater number need to begin, that we need to work on to ensure that all schools are great schools.
Okay. Rashad?
However unfair and unjust that system might be, Ms. Moran has done nothing to change that system. She hasn't organized in the community to get people to organize or rally around that issue. She's had 6 years to do that. It's time for a change, right? Obviously, property taxes should not determine the level of education or that educational experience of kids. We are again placing the emphasis on the adults and how much they're making and where they're living at. I know people personally who have left St. Paul Public Schools, moved out to a suburb, and while in St. Paul Public Schools, they were 2 or 3 grades ahead, according to the papers. They get out to the suburbs, they're 2, 3 grades behind. So obviously there's a problem. It's been a problem. I'm not sure why Ms. Moran hasn't worked on it, because she said herself that she's had many years of experience with this.
Okay. Thank you. No, question 7. Due to increasing gentrification, it is becoming less and less affordable for current residents of Frogtown to remain living here. Do you feel this is an important issue? And if so, how will you address it? Rena?
Yeah. So, yes, I talked earlier about my concern with the Green Line and gentrification, what will happen with redevelopment coming to a community, and starting organizing around the Save Our Homes campaign. I took that initial fear or thought into the legislative process. And one of the first bills that I dropped as a state legislator was a bill that would cap property tax at a level when redevelopment happens, so that we in this community would not be disproportionately impacted by rising taxes and fixed incomes that our seniors are on, but really protect us so that we can benefit from the redevelopment that's happening in our community. At the same time, you know, as we spoke about the last question about property taxes in schools, and that is the current process, you know, raising and creating a tax base for us to be able to, you know, support the needs of our kids in our school system is also important that happen too. And we need a tax base.
Thank you, Rena. Rashad?
So Ms. Moran talked about the cap on property tax, but there's no cap on rent amounts. So when you see gentrification happen, like it's happened in the Selby Dell neighborhood, which was mostly black when I was a kid, which is now predominantly white, gentrification happens. Store prices go up. There's stores right on my block, restaurants I can't afford to eat at, but I'm living there, right? They're in our community. When you think about, you know, gentrification, right? Who suffers from that? People of color. Ms. Moran has supported the new stadium that's coming in after she's been quoted back in 2010 as saying that she understood what the 94 freeway and how that destroyed the black community, the Rondo community. Now, here she is supporting this stadium, which is going to have the same impact on one of the most poverty-stricken areas of our district. We have to think about people, the masses of people, not the pockets of billionaire stadiums. There's been plenty of research. A stadium does nothing for our community.
Thank you, Rashad. Okay, the last constituent question we have is, according to Minnesota statute 2048.06, there are 4 requirements to run for a seat in the Minnesota House. First, that you are an eligible voter. Are you both eligible voters?
Yes.
Yes.
That you are not running for any other office.
Yes.
No.
No. No.
That you are at least 21 years of age. Rena?
Absolutely.
I need to see your ID.
Absolutely.
And that you have, okay, so this part, this constituent got this wrong.
Yeah.
It's actually that you have, first it's you have maintained residency in the district from which you seek election, and it's not 30 days, it's actually 6 months immediately preceding the election in the district from which you are elected. So
Yeah, I've been here 31 years.
So do you both currently reside in District 65A?
Yeah, I live in the Rondo community.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep, 31 years, Karen.
Okay.
16 years for me.
Okay. All right. Well, it is now 10:10. We are ahead of schedule. If you two would like to rebut like adults on anything that we just talked about on the constituent questions, are you both open to that or not? If not, we'll just keep going.
Yeah, I just want to do a few rebuttals.
I want to be able to stick to the schedule. I have to.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, well then I invite both of you now to give your closing statements, and I'm going to give both of you 4 minutes instead of 3, okay? So,
Me first?
Rena first.
I like last.
Do you want to go last this time?
Opponent over there.
All right, the challenge.
I want to stick to the schedule that you've set, Miss Karen. Thank you.
Okay, Rena,
All right. So we have had some great discussions here, and it has been a wonderful opportunity to share with the Frogtown, Rondo, Midway, North End, and Cathedral Hill residents about my record to really create a more fair and just district and state. It is really important to me that we create equitable outcomes and that people have the opportunity to be self-sufficient, take care of themselves. I don't work from a deficit-based lens. I don't work from what we don't do. I work from solutions and what we can do and what we must do to transform the way people are living in this community. I also would just like to say that when we talk about the stadium and my support for the stadium, you know, when I talk to people in the community, I have huge support for that stadium. That land has been barren for over 50 years. Now we will have a tax base. Ramsey County, St. Paul has the worst disparity in the Twin Cities, in the 7 metro county. We need to bring in the resources into our community. And with that, I have been in conversation, have commitment. And I'm working from a place of commitment that we will bring jobs into this community and hire right here locally for our youth and our families in this community. So for me, in closing, despite Rashad's rhetoric about the fact that I have accomplished, that the facts are that I have accomplished and passed legislation that matches exactly what Rashad says he wants and more. He's talking about what he's going to do. I've done it and got more work to do. The work is not done, but I'm going to continue to fight for us to move forward so that we are one of the greatest districts there is, and we have the power to create the change that need to be changed in our district, right outside the Capitol. I have consistently introduced and passed legislation to move people of color forward through job creation, job training, workforce development, from education, K-12, post-secondary, early learning, creating opportunities for small business loan and financial assistance, investment in housing and homelessness. I've worked to hold police more accountable. I've worked on mental health care for children. I've found funding for Ujamaa Place, who are working with men in our community to re-enter and to do what they are called to do, and that is to be the men of our family. I have worked with St. Paul, brought in $600,000 to Ujamaa Place over the next 3 years, $1 million for St. Paul with funding continue out for the next 3 years, whose mission is to eliminate racism and to empower girls and women. And when you empower girls and women, you empower families. And when you empower families, you empower a community. And when you empower communities, you are empowering our state. I was able to get $1.5 million for Girls in Action because our black girls have been suspended at a high number. They're not graduating. They are doing transformational work. I work with Community Action Partnership with their FAME program to make sure they got the dollars to, if you save $1, you get another $3, and you use that money to start a small business, do closing costs, or start a small business. I work through the Promised Neighborhood, transformational work where we are stabilizing family, creating better education outcomes, and giving parents the tools they need to be the first teacher of their kids. I've carried legislation for the Hallie Q. Brown and the Community Ambassador programs for our youth down there in St. Paul who are hanging out on 5th Street, and have transformed how businesses see working with our youth, are hiring our youth. We have community ambassadors doing the work and working in partnership with our police department, have done that. I have worked to pass a minimum wage, but I am fighting for 15 now. And I'm running for re-election to keep moving us forward, and I ask for your vote to continue the work that I've started, to build on the work that I've started, and to do that in partnership with a community of people who only want the best for themselves, their family, and their community.
Thank you, Rena.
Please vote for me August 9th.
Rashad?
So throughout this past hour and a half, I haven't been keeping track of the number of times Ms. Moran has said, we will do something. We will, right? It's been 6 years, right? It should be, we have, right? Poverty is going up. The education gap is going up. Unemployment rate going up. Housing gap going up. Every disparity that you can think of on paper, in the flesh, has gone up. So I think it's time for a change. We need a fresh face, a fresh voice, someone that's going to stand up for the people without a voice. But even better, someone who's going to rally the people and get them all involved, right? We've had protests, we've had meetings. We have very diverse groups of people who come there, all in support of changing the status quo. Now, one thing I really want to talk about in my closing statement is the fact that Miss Moran wants to speak to my inexperience, right, and has made a point to really talk about that in the media, okay? So I just want people to think, what was Miss Moran's resume like when she took office? Would she look back now and say she was unfit for the position? And when you think about the legislator, right, and our government, it's really an extension of white supremacy that operates off anti-blackness, right? So it's hard for me as a young black man to sit here and listen to her participate in that system by alluding to my inexperience, okay? And equating that inexperience to being unqualified. So I want to talk about my experience here at the beginning of my time as a legislator, right? In comparison to when Ms. Moran took office. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I have a law enforcement certificate. I was post-certified to be a police officer. When you think about that experience and that knowledge in the current state of our criminal justice system, I have the knowledge and experience to be able to go in there, hone in on what needs to be changed. And laws need to be changed, or we will continue to see police brutality in our streets. Another thing is this lowering of expectations that Ms. Moran has put out there to the community. Ms. Moran talks about, why is he challenging the only black woman in the house, okay? I want Ms. Moran to hear this. I want our listeners to hear this. No one sitting in this room would tell me to tell my daughter's teacher that since she's the only black girl in her classroom, don't worry about if she can read, write, or count. Don't worry about if she's effective. Just pass her on to the next grade because she's the only black girl in your class. I find that ridiculous. I find it to be based on a socialization of black people and having low expectations for black people. People in this district, people in this state, people in this country who are affected by the disparities, they know how they feel. It's not about a racial equity grade or a couple $100,000 here. If we had our government complying, if our elected officials were making sure that the cities were complying with the laws that Congress has enacted, that $600,000 for Ujamaa Place would have been $3 million, right? So we got to think we can't continue to take crumbs, because as we take crumbs, more and more people move into poverty, more and more people become unemployed, more and more students are being uneducated, more and more prison beds are being built. We need someone that has a knowledge of that. I've spent 7 years in education, straight out of college, working on racial equity issues, right? When you look at the data, I don't think that anybody thinks when I say police brutality is on the rise, nobody looks at that as rhetoric. That's reality. I don't think that when people say, hey, we have more homeless people, they can look around. That's not rhetoric. That's reality. The reality is that this district needs someone that's going to fight, somebody that's going to champion issues like a Bernie Sanders, right? Someone that's going to fight for the people, the masses of people, and not just twos and fews who are connected to those circles. Thank you.
All right. Well, there you have it. There is our DFL primary debate of candidates. And I want to remind everybody to go vote on August 9th. Hopefully, after listening to this debate on WFNU, Low Power 94.1 FM St. Paul, Living Loud, with Karen J., myself. All right. Hopefully, you will be a more informed voter. And if you still have questions, I would invite you to reach out to Rena Moran's camp or Rashad Turner's camp and ask those questions. I know we weren't able to get to everyone's questions because I worked on the debate schedule all weekend. So I want to thank Rena Moran and Rashad Turner for coming in and allowing
Absolutely.
WFNU to host and myself, and for also coming very prepared. Both of you, I think, did well. That's just my commentary.
Thank you.
I was impressed, and I hope you were impressed.
Oh, yeah. Good job,
You
Karen.
did a wonderful job.
Okay, thanks.
Congratulations.
You did a great job.
Now,
And
Russ
the
on the
lights, yeah.
yeah,
And the light man.
DJ
did an absolutely
Russ.
awesome job.
Fong on the
and
camera.
Vong
Vong.
for videotaping, and we will
Thank
have
you.
that available for you. When? Before the primary. It will be by the end of the week, would you say? Or how about by Thursday? End of day Thursday?
She's putting the pressure on you, Vong.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, we'll say by Friday at the latest. And so thank you both for participating.
Thank you, Karen, for having us.
Thank you
Good
for
luck.
the opportunity.
Good luck to
Absolutely.
both of you.
Okay.
I think my opinion is that we will be just fine with either one of you representing us. You both have very strong opinions. You both have, I don't know. I think that we would be okay with either one. And I think we're lucky in District 65A to have two candidates running that are both good. I mean, some districts don't have that, so we're pretty lucky, I think. I don't know. But that's all I'll say on that, because I have to be neutral, so. But I'm very, and thank you, Rena, for your service to our district and all of the changes you have made.
It's been an honor.
And Rashad, thank you for all that you do for Black Lives Matter.
Well, thank you.
And sticking up for people of color.
And after I'm elected, I would love to have Miss Moran as a mentor, someone to sort of guide me through that process and give me some tips. So,
Yeah, ditto. And I
Yeah.
would like, after I'm elected and return to the office, to work on the legislation that I would like for us to find a way that we can come together around the issues of police brutality that you have passion around.
we've
You
tried that, didn't get anywhere.
Well,
Well,
you haven't
try
worked,
again.
but you
I
haven't
think
worked with
Nakima
me.
Levy-Pounds
You
even
haven't
tried
worked with
that.
me. That's
That
the
didn't
difference.
get her anywhere.
I need you to work with me.
Oh,
No.
I have. I've tried.
Yeah, that's the difference here. It's transformational.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Vote Rashad.
This is the end of the debate. Go ahead. You're going to give one more plug for you two? Well, vote for whoever you want. How about that?
And I mean that. You haven't.
Um,